What's up, Internet? It's me, Jake Coburn, and you are listening to another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast. I began to record episodes for this podcast at the beginning of the year 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the inspiration behind these podcasts was to provide a platform for the pillars and leaders of my community to share their voice and to help construct an inspiring narrative for people in this time of crisis when a need for the upliftment of the spirit has been at its most urgent. This podcast centers around themes of art, creativity, spirituality, and psychedelics. And the incredible people I've had conversations with are all people who have bravely stepped outside of the conventional way of thinking and the conventional way of being and have transcended the matrix of the default reality, living life on their own terms. They are all people I respect deeply, and it has been an amazing opportunity and a privilege to speak to and learn from them. Most of these podcasts have been recorded live through Instagram, which is a new and somewhat experimental medium to conduct podcasts. I truly hope you enjoy this podcast and continue to tune in for future episodes. It's really a labor of love on my part. And thank you so much again for listening. Without further ado, here's the show. This episode today is with artist Akira Beard. Akira was a teacher at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, where I studied as a student, and I've always felt a deep resonance with his work and have always been struck by the depth and wisdom of Akira himself, which he pours into his work. His body of work is prolific and a shining example of the integration of the teachings of the Dharma into a visual form. We talked about embracing that which challenges us and the hidden blessings within that. We talked about painting, and we talked about Akira's transition into becoming a tattoo artist. This was a beautiful discussion with a beautiful artist, and I hope that you enjoy this podcast. What's up, man?
Hey,
Hey, how you doing?
been good, man. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, it's nice to see you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, you sound really clear. The connection's really good. That's great. There's been a lot of like little technical glitchy things with these conversations, but
Okay.
yeah, it's been an experimental process. But yeah, man, I'm so happy that you could join us here.
Yeah,
We've
dude. Thanks for inviting me.
For sure, yeah, yeah. You've been on a real journey since I last saw you. I guess I have too, because I think the last time I saw you was before I went off to Bali. It was originally just going to be for like a few weeks to do this mural project, and I ended up staying here for like 2 years instead. And
Really?
yeah, yeah, I came over here just to paint murals for this business Karma House, which was like it's still up. It's like a tattoo studio slash yoga workshop space slash vegan cafe. It's very Ubudian and the combination of all these kinds of different things. And they hired me as a muralist, so I came over here just to paint that, and I had a round trip ticket that was like 6 weeks later, and yeah, just decided to stay. You know,
Awesome, man.
I was doing the tattoo apprenticeship in Nevada City, and kind of wrapped that up right before I left. So I didn't really have any significant ties to California except for where I was living at the time and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been
Cool.
cool to see you get into tattooing also.
Yeah. So you're tattooing in Bali also?
Yeah, not right now, not really, because of the whole situation. You know, there's like not really many people here anymore. And the people I've been tattooing are generally people that are travelers who come here for just a short period of time. And creates a kind of urgency because people are only here for, a week, 2 weeks, and we have to do the tattoo like right away before they leave. But I have a
Okay.
little tattoo studio in my house. I was working at Karma House before when they
Okay.
first opened, but since I migrated into my own home studio that's private and out kind of more in nature, it's very quiet. Whereas the other studio was like in the in the thick of the city with like traffic noise and stuff all the time.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. How's the tattoo journey been for you so far?
It was really intense. It was going really well. Just as you know, this whole Corona thing happened, and as you know, it just kind of put it to a stop. So, I mean, man, I did it for a year and a half, and it's just been incredible.
Yeah. It's challenging, right?
Oh, absolutely, man. The
Yeah, me.
first, uh, the first year alone, man. The first 6 months were just crazy.
I know. I remember the first time I tried actually tattooing because I think there's an assumption that if you have a lot of drawing experience, you're like, oh yeah, like, I mean, you could probably confidently pick up like any two-dimensional art medium, whether it's if you've never done it before or not, like gouache or something that you're not really experienced with, and just kind of nail it because it's all principally connected. But man, the first time I tried tattooing, it was so awful. I was just like, wow, I'm so terrible at this. This is so hard, you know? But that was one of the
Yeah,
things that got me like hooked though, because I liked the challenge of it and the feeling of
sure.
pushing through that resistance of like, no, I'm not gonna quit. I'm just gonna keep like working at this. And then eventually when you finally kind of nail it, like you get to a point where you do your first kind of more successful go with it, it feels so good. You're like, yeah, those lines are so clean, like
Yeah, it's really humbling, right?
so humbling.
Just just to draw a straight line, it's not easy.
No.
That's that's what blew my mind. It's kind of like you just have to accept it, and it really did feel like starting over in a way. And I enjoy that challenge too. Like all sorts of
Mhm.
fears come up, you know?
Yeah. It's very involved too because when you're drawing or painting, you're kind of just in your own isolated little creative bubble. Um, you have this like intimacy with the paper, the canvas that you're working on, and it's very private. But when you're tattooing, there's so much in the interaction with the other person and having to hold space and be a grounding presence also because the experience is so kind of physically and emotionally intense for people,
Hmm.
and just spending so much time with another person in that really intimate space is significantly different than anything that you really experience when you're painting. I guess the closest thing would be
Yeah,
working with a model or something, but it's not the same.
it's not the same. You know, in the beginning, I mean, I did it for more practical reasons, but
Yeah,
there was kind of some confusion, like why am I doing this, especially with, you know, the challenges of the apprenticeship. But I began to have those experiences when I began tattooing that you're saying with like being very intimate, and from then on, I was hooked. It was like an extension of my interest as an artist already. You know what I mean?
yeah, for
That
sure.
vulnerability and just communication on a whole different level. You know, it's a
Yeah.
very interesting dynamic with doing an art piece with someone else. You know,
Hmm. Yeah,
unlike any other.
for me is the same way. I think that yeah, probably the initial motivations to get into tattooing were like practical, more resource based. Um,
Mhm.
but then I had experiences through it that you noticed that the experience was profound for the other person, like the person receiving the tattoo, that it was like deeply meaningful or deeply cathartic, kind of had a more spiritual component to it. And those experiences were really reinforcing, kind of like getting goosebumps and just being like, wow, like this is powerful. And
Yeah,
this,
absolutely.
this, this is something that has a lot of meaning to it, actually, if you orient that way. you know, and creatively too. It's a great creative challenge because it's a highly restricted medium, you know. But
Yeah,
I
there's
think the limitations they can uh, be alchemized into a way that you can really do something magical with it.
yeah, man, there's a lot of layers to it. I'm really excited for the future of it, you know. I mean, it's on pause right now, but man, it's pretty extraordinary. I think
Yeah.
especially for people like you and myself with our backgrounds and just kind of the evolution of that, our artistic journey into something like this.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, the work I've seen you do too looks awesome. Looks
Thanks,
really,
man.
really good. Yeah, I'm really
Really
excited to
appreciate that.
see you bust out like some huge back pieces or something like
Yeah,
that. You know,
yeah, man, I'm working
gets you
towards it.
really work with the skin as a canvas.
Yeah.
Cool, man. It seems like more people are kind of joining us now. Do you want to just kind of introduce yourself a bit?
Sure. My name's Akira. Akira Beard. I'm an artist. Currently, I'm living in Florida, Fort Lauderdale. I moved here from California to pick up tattooing, and I've been doing that for just over a year and a half. I'm at Stefano's Tattoo Studio, Fort Lauderdale, and I'm loving it. You know, I put painting to the side, but because of the quarantine situation, ironically, I picked up painting again because I can't tattoo.
Yeah,
So, and I'm loving that, you know, but I can't wait to get back to tattooing. And at
awesome.
some point, you know, those two worlds, I can't wait for those to collide, you know, painting and tattooing.
Yeah. How do you see those two colliding for you? I'm curious.
I don't really know. Like, that's kind of how I work. I'm open to, you know, wherever the future leads. And I work pretty organically, so I just feel confident that even though I'm not painting, or I wasn't, the two will overlap at some point. I mean, obviously, you know, I'd like to tattoo my paintings, but
Yeah.
I also like to work with ideas. And so the idea part, I have no idea, like, you know, no pun
Hmm.
intended, where that would lead. So, but that's exciting for the future.
Right. Yeah. Being familiar with your work and the way that you utilize spaces like gallery spaces and put messages all over the walls and things like that, and really put emphasis on the meaning behind your work and the message that you're trying to communicate. I'd love to see that cross over into
Yeah,
tattooing. You know, find somebody who's just totally open and could give you complete freedom for you to, yeah, think of their body in the same way of like how you can imprint a really powerful message with maybe like writing or something like that being a part of it as well. Yeah, it'd be
yeah,
amazing.
absolutely, man. Well, you know, the funny thing with that subculture is you just never know, like, who's going to come into the tattoo shop, and that's already happened. I almost tattooed somebody, like in pure spontaneity. They saw my art, they really loved it, they loved how you know, my thinking, and we almost did it. And right before doing it, he asked, "What am I going to do?" And I said, "I have no idea. Isn't that the point?" And you know, he changed his mind at the last minute, but I was terrified, and he asked me, "Are you scared?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Good." So, you know, it's not time yet, but you know, like at some point, I'll get the skills, get more confidence, and yeah, man, it's just the future's wide open, you know?
Yeah, I'm 100% confident that you'll have those opportunities in the future for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, your work speaks for itself. You're such a prolific painter. When I met you, you were teaching at the Academy of Art in San Francisco, which is also where I went to school. I just like, I mean, your work, I think it really stood out among the teaching body of the school because I mean, a lot of the artists that were teaching at the school were primarily they're really academic, but your work was really experimental and really unique, you know, and had a lot of meaning to it. And I think that's something that I've always resonated most with your work is that level of like how deep you go into the narrative of it and like what you're like why you're trying to create this thing and what meaning that holds for the viewer and stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's funny because, you know, I only taught at the school for a few years, But one of the students, he says, I'm not going to be there very long because of kind of what you described. It was a challenge in that way because I wasn't, I mean, I'll just be direct in the way that I just didn't really fit the academic way of teaching or whatever. Again, I was like just more organic, more into ideas, and it just wasn't my place. But that's why I love art personally. Like it's an opportunity to really explore personal ideas. And I mean, I never get bored. It's never ending. There's always personal ideas that just come with more and more life experience. I mean, the tattoo thing alone, man, it's only been a year and a half. But man, if I really took a break, I could already make so much artwork from the experiences, like writing and painting and drawings.
Yeah. I was like scrolling through your Instagram feed yesterday, and I was just like blown away by how much art you crank out. Like you're just you're just a painting machine. There's like so many drawings, so many paintings. It makes me feel like slow or lazy, you know. 'Cause I'll spend
Well,
like a really long time on like one painting, and I feel like sometimes I'm too like precious with it. And I think that one of the things, it's almost one of the hallmarks of mastery is that people, when they get to a certain level, become way more free in their expression. You saw that with like Picasso's work, for example, where it, you're like, there's a fearlessness that comes with that. Whereas I recognize in myself a bit more sort of like calculated or timid almost with the decisions that I make with my work, which makes it take a lot longer. But yeah, I really appreciate that just uninhibited flow that I recognize in your work.
thanks, man. The way I think of it as my vocation. You know what I mean? It's really what I live for. It's why I'm here. I really feel that way. So it's not even a matter. It's not even a matter of discipline, really. It's just like what I do. You know what I mean? So I'm always doing it, in some form. Like I started writing again, and I'm loving that. If it's not painting, I mean, it'd be tattooing. It's something. So it's just, the exploration, the expression, creativity, using the imagination, technical skills, all that stuff. Being an artist.
Yeah, it's something I really value about your work, or that, something I recognize about it that's unique is that it seems like you've found a way to make painting your spiritual practice. It's like instead of having, or maybe now it's tattooing, I'm not sure, but instead of having more like a formal meditation practice, you seem to be cultivating all the same virtues that you might get from having something like a meditation practice, but through these really deeply reverent spiritual portraits and things like that.
Yeah, man. I mean, the process as well, especially at a time like this. It's taken me a long time, even though I've made art for a while, to really value it as a practice. And especially at a time, with quarantine where we lock ourselves in, man, I am just so grateful because it really does become a meditation. Like even the music that I listen to, recently I've been listening to like soundtracks from old movies, it really getting lost in the process and it's taking a journey, kind of like astral planes, like really going somewhere. And, the next thing you know, like the painting it's gone somewhere as opposed to being so self-conscious in your ego, so much in control, trying to make anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just love that because it's really a special practice in that way that you can not only meditate and go somewhere, go beyond yourself, but you can have something tangible like after the fact,
Totally.
Not only that, it can inspire or have any type of effect on anyone, even if it's just one other person outside yourself, That's pretty
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah, totally. I think that it's like finding that sweet spot between surrender and competency, though, because you're somebody who's really studied academic drawing and painting, to get to a really high level of competency with that, where you can,
Yeah.
you know, render portraits really, really accurately and beautifully, and you're not having to think about how to use a brush when you're painting, or like how to mix colors. All that has become kind of embodied, and it's become second nature. It's like a language that you speak fluently. So now
Yeah,
you're at a place where you can kind of just let intuition take over. I think
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
what you might see at the Academy of Art, and why so little of the student body's work was really that meaningful, is because it's like an earlier stage, where a lot of people are still learning those fundamentals of drawing and painting to even get to the level of competency where they can speak with confidence what their message is. And I mean, you've just already done that foundation work to get to that place of having such a refined vocabulary to be able to express your ideas through.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it's interesting as well. Like everyone has their own, reasons for making art, for being an artist, their own past history, their own journey. And for myself, it was really like making art. It was really born out of necessity, to begin to know who I am, to really organize my psyche. Like when I went to the Academy of Art, I was struggling so much mentally. And so when I discovered, wow, there's actual visual language, there's these techniques to making art, um, I really, with all intention, set out to learn those skills to begin to work out all this stuff that was, just haunting me. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And that carried on for over 15 years. So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing, man. Just like the potential of art for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how your work also seems to reflect this internal shift. 'Cause I've been following your work for a long time. And I remember when you were doing the portraits of like gangster rappers and stuff like that, and how that kind of transitioned into you putting more emphasis on like spiritual teachers. And even then, maybe you pushed beyond that, and your work became really kind of like more abstract and more kind of numinous. Like you were pushing beyond just the surface into like soul territory or something like that. But
Yeah, that's great that you like pick up on that because there's a story behind the whole thing, and it's so sincere in the way that it really came from the inside out. Like I didn't plan to paint spiritual teachers or something, but it came as the result of becoming a spiritual person. But before that, I was very, just indoctrinated in culture. I had to work that stuff out. So it was a beautiful, my own personal development psychologically. And the art mirrors that development. It captures it like in photographs almost, you know what I mean? And that's all just reflective of the life I was living. Like you brought up like Chogyam Trungpa, right?
Mhm.
Pima Chodron. They came into my life when my life fell apart. And when my life fell apart, I discovered, the doors to spirituality or whatever you want to call it, they opened up. And that's when I discovered teachers like that. And so to better understand it'd be like just reading a book of theirs and writing down what they said. And I would do that. I'd plagiarize it and I'd put on a portrait that I would paint of them. You know what I mean? Like somebody came to one of my shows during that time, and they saw like all this writing I did on the wall, and very sarcastically called me a plagiarist. But the irony is, it's like it's universal wisdom. It's not like really plagiarizing because it's not even the individual citing it, like somebody citing the Buddha. It's for everyone. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
right.
But
It's
that
very
artwork
meta.
came as the result of like me discovering that part of the world, that part of myself through art, and that's what to me, I just love that.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty meta too. So, you get somebody like Pema Chodron, and I love the way that she communicates and how she teaches. It's just so like crystal clear and easy to understand. But she's referring to Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche most of the time, and doesn't really take credit for the ideas necessarily. And he's referring to whoever else, you know, ancient teachers of a Tibetan lineage who are referring to, probably the Buddha. So it's kind of like this meta thing of nobody can take ownership for universal truths and knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, when you start a painting, do you know what you're going to paint before you start painting? You know, do you get like this thing, you're like, oh, I'm going to do this portrait of so and so, or do you just kind of go at the canvas and then this thing emerges out of it?
It depends, like, because I work in all, it's like a spectrum. I work in all sorts of ways from both ends. So there's a time when I worked more, I would say consciously, conscious in the way that I would know beforehand. I would know what the result looked like before I even started, you know?
Mm.
But again, like in my own development, like I discovered the subconscious mind. And when I explored that, it became the opposite. Images were revealed to me from the process. It was a you know, like the point was to start out as a blank slate as much as possible, and something, you know, would sometimes it wouldn't appear, you know, like it's like looking into the clouds, right? And you see
Yeah.
an image, and then you just pull it out from that. But
Mm.
then that's how I got into abstraction. That's how I got into those life drawings, with the life drawing series, all that cross hatching stuff, all the figures twisted.
Yeah.
Um, I never knew, and that's the point, I never knew what the drawing would look like from the very beginning to the very end, you know? And I love that because it would reveal, like, you know, kind of archetypes that exist within me and possibly that are more collective. But I also work the other way around. Like, I read Helen Keller's autobiography during quarantine, and I was just really inspired. Yeah, so I've started two paintings of her, paying homage, you know?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I work, it just depends on mood.
Hmm. Yeah, that concept of seeing forms in chaotic, just like, you know, chaotic occurrences of information, and that's called pareidolia. And that's when you are able to see shapes and clouds or whatever. And discovering that or being introduced to that was one of the most influential ideas, I think, for my own creativity. One of the most liberating too. So one of my favorite ways to make art is just to create stains on some kind of surface, or like scribbles on a piece of paper, just some kind of like random chaotic information, and then to look into that. It's almost like scrying, I guess, or something, you know, like it's looking at a Rorschach test of what this thing is, and then creating out of that. And definitely some of the pieces I've made from that have ended up being deeply meaningful, actually, even though those narratives weren't consciously conjured. It's not like I had this idea in my mind and I was like, oh, I'm going to paint that. It's like this thing comes out from, I guess, my subconscious mind or wherever it comes from. And then you look at it after the fact and you're like, whoa, what is that? You know, like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, that's like this thing and that relates to this. And, you know, you find meaning in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love hearing others' interpretations, their own projections onto the thing, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's an abstract piece or even like a piece with imagery that's vague enough, you know. Yeah, I love working that way as well.
Mm.
It's my favorite way to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably mine too. I'm really curious to ask you because, like, a lot of people message me who are beginner artists and they want to learn how to become a painter. But a lot of people feel stuck or lost or confused, even where to begin. They might have some kind of vision that's like a burning. It's an expression that they really feel passionate about wanting to release into the world, but they don't really know how to go about putting that onto a canvas or a piece of paper or whatever it is. How would you recommend for them to just start the learning process, and what resources would you suggest for aspiring artists to become more competent with drawing and painting?
Uh, well, yeah, I think you know, the basics are everything, and just like, you know, starting with drawing, like, you know, the stronger drawing skills you have, it's going to affect everything else, you know, especially painting. And the resources today, man, they're just like, they're infinite. I mean, YouTube alone, you know, it's like you can
Yeah.
get an entire education if, you know, your passion is there. Like myself, I didn't have that stuff. And like today, I can't believe how much resources out there, and it's free. So maybe the problem would be just abundance. There's too much. I don't know. But I think the second part to that is it's one thing to learn the skills. I think if you're a person that has anything to say, to express, that's hard for anyone, to really connect that bridge. So you have a skill now, you know how to draw, you know how to paint, but how do you actually express what's important to you? And that, like, I don't know, I almost want to say it's just like you could only figure that on your own by just maybe repetition or just coming to know yourself more and more, which a lot of it has to do with courage, I feel, you know what I mean? Like really kind of, going to that place of not being concerned of external things, whether it's the market, whether it's being judged by others, but really making, the art, the expression that you feel in your heart that you want to make.
Yeah, not being afraid to fail too, I think is a huge one, because so many people are stuck in a particular thing that they know how to do, and they don't want to push outside of that, because pushing into that discomfort zone of creating one piece of art or many pieces of artwork that don't look as good as this thing that you've really rehearsed and grounded in can be like a really terrifying experience. And I've met a lot of students in the art schools that I've been to that are really amazing representational draftspeople when it comes to drawing and painting, say, a still life or a figure or something. But that's all they do, because they're kind of afraid, I think, of trying anything else.
Yeah.
Having to experiment, come up with their own style or technique or their own compositions. It's just like they haven't rehearsed that. They'd rather just do the thing that they've practiced a lot than try something completely new that they might fail at.
Yeah, I think that's just, it's very typical, whether it's human nature or it's definitely, kind of the human condition, just to always kind of want safety and control and comfort. But that's the beautiful thing. Art, it can be safe in that way, to practice ideas like that, to allow yourself to go out your comfort zone. But at the same time, it's interesting how, like all of us, myself included, how you can be so intimidated by just like your own space with a blank canvas or something. You know what I mean? To really allow yourself to go certain places. But I guess the final judgment is it's on you, your integrity. Like, did you really, take it as far as you wanted to take it? Did you take risks? Did you did you challenge yourself in those ways? And that's something I love about the process is all of that potential is there. It's so easy to get complacent and comfortable and just repeat yourself. But, to keep it fresh and just to try new ideas, it definitely, I think it takes courage and will.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was listening to a Thich Nhat Hanh audiobook last night, and he said something that was like, people will choose a familiar form of suffering over the fear of the unknown. It's like people get like stuck in whatever situation they're in life, and I think this relates a lot creatively, because people also get stuck in a kind of like a familiar limitation within their creative process, even if it's not the maximum of what their potential is creatively, just because it's so intimidating to try to do something that they've never done before.
Yeah. Again, I think I could definitely say this for myself. I'm sure for you it relates as well. But to get into something like tattooing, like after painting and drawing, and starting from the beginning, like, okay, you know how to draw, but then, to do it on skin, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a huge challenge and it's a big risk, and it's not easy, but like, I love that part of it. And they go hand in hand. It's like tattooing, like it's already influenced my painting and my drawing. I think they really do go hand in hand. And I say not just technically, but, confidence-wise as well, because you have to be confident to be a tattoo artist. You know what I mean? You can't you can't be in your head the way that you can be in your head in your own studio, like freaking out about your painting or something. Like you have to be confident and cool, and that takes development. You gotta, at least for me, it's like definitely have to work on that. And like that alone would uh, deter some artists from getting into tattooing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I've heard artists like find out that I've gotten into tattooing. It's a common response. I could never do that, and I can never do that because it's permanent. What if I make a mistake? Like it comes with the territory. You got to make mistakes. You know what I mean? But yeah, and it's you gotta. I mean, I definitely found my way of working with that. That you just got to accept it because it is on someone's skin. You know what I mean? And I've been really fortunate. I don't know how it worked for you, but it's amazing, man. Some of the people that I guess volunteered, like they become part of my life in that way, in an intimate way that they let me do like a full sleeve, and I had barely any tattoo experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But yeah, getting back to the thing, uh, yeah, taking risks, challenging yourself. There's plenty of space for that. Like, with the creative process of being an artist. I think it's really important for growth.
Yeah. I think that slight kind of like fear or the facing of the unknown when it comes to tattooing is something that never goes away because no matter how experienced somebody is, even if somebody's been tattooing for like 20 years, it's like every single person is different and there's always the unknown, and the need to solve problems and stuff like that. And also, I think like no tattoo is perfect. Also, even the most masterful tattoo artists that I've met and seen their work, it's still a human thing, and there's still always like a sort of flawed human quality to it. Just like in the best paintings, also, and
Yeah,
I think that that's something that makes it more valuable. That if it was just a machine that was doing it and you could just upload an image from your computer and it would do it perfectly on somebody's body, it wouldn't quite have the same impact. Just knowing that somebody had to labor over that really intently, and concentrate really deeply to make this thing happen. And it's hard and requires a lot of discipline, both from the tattooist and the person being tattooed, is something that makes it really valuable.
yeah. Do you embrace that? That awareness, like being imperfect, like in not in
I do,
tattooing,
yeah.
but in your art.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
That's
I try
good.
to embrace that, I guess, in life in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a probably a habitual thing, right? Like that you want it because it's appearances. You want like to appear not perfect, but like in a certain way to other people. And so, like in your own process, it's like, I mean, for anyone's, you want it to come out a certain way, and that can become the goal, which is ultimately distracting. That shouldn't be the goal, that you're trying to make something so like perfect when, like you're saying, there's a flaw in that. It's like the human hand isn't perfect, even if it appears that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think something that's really helped me with all of my creative endeavors is understanding just the process of learning something and developing a new thing. So
Yeah,
when it comes to tattooing, I wasn't expecting for myself to be a master tattoo artist. I'm not expecting to be a master tattoo artist now,
mhm.
when I first started, because I understand that it requires, like anything else, kind of 10,000 hours of practice to get
Yeah,
really good at it. And because I'm I mean, I obviously still have more to learn, and there's always more to learn and explore when it comes to drawing and painting. But having had more experience in learning that as a skill and seeing my own progression over a long period of time, I can relate to that now when I jump into other art forms or other endeavors, just in life in general, because I understand that failure and that learning by trial and error is just, it's inevitable and it's essential to get good at anything. It's like no matter what it is, if you've never done it before, chances are you're going to like suck at it a little bit, and you have to kind of embrace the suck as just part of it, as part of a learning, but also knowing that the more time you put into anything, the more experience you gain in it, the more confidence you gain within it, and the better it becomes, and the more refined and honed you get into that. So that was kind of like the pressure release valve for me, I think, when I was learning to tattoo, is just kind of keeping my eye on not where I am now, but like where will I be in 5 years, 10 years if I just consistently work at this thing. And I try to look at things in my painting work and whatever, you know, like even if I'm like working out or something like that, I try to maintain that same perspective, to not get too caught on like immediate results. Instead, look at the bigger picture of how these small, consistent efforts add up to something over time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of my morning practice. I do this physical thing, like stretching, exercise, Tai Chi, like every single morning. And while I do that stuff, I listen to like different speakers on YouTube, and I write it down. It's on my wall, actually. You can see some of it. It's all these like quotes that I hear from them, and one of them is consistency over time leads to results. And that's part of my morning routine. And I do the morning routine because of tattooing, because it makes me just, you know, like you have to sit there for long hours. So you got to physically have endurance, but also mental endurance, like all that stuff. And, you know, doing something every single day. I've been doing it now for probably 6 months. I've only missed 2 days in 6 months. Man, it's just consistency, like to see it really does lead to results. So if you apply that to anything, I mean, it sounds like common sense, but it's just like, it's stuff like that I didn't discover until recently because of tattooing, because it demands it, you know, at least it has for me, to become a different person. You know what I'm saying? In these ways.
I remember seeing this graphic online that was showing, it's like if you take 365, however many days there are in a year, times 0, or you know, you have nothing. But if you do one little thing every single day for 365 days, 1 times 365 is 365. Like you've actually, like it adds up quite a lot. And you know, you're that farther along by doing very little, actually. And,
yeah, absolutely.
I think when people start a new endeavor, like people that might just try painting and they've never painted before, the experience of not being successful at it is such an uncomfortable experience for people emotionally. Like that has such an impact on people's self-perception, self-esteem sometimes, that it discourages them from continuing onto that. So that's why I think it is important to try to really communicate, and that this is a long-term process, that it requires those small, consistent, disciplined actions over a long period of time. That you can't you know, get discouraged by those initial frustrations, because in learning anything, you know, imagine when you were first trying to walk, how many times you fell over, or when you were learning to speak. Probably, like, we don't remember, but probably learning to speak, you know, English that was probably a hard thing to do when you were a little baby. And we did it, you know. So we all know how to do that. We all know how to learn something, and to go through that process. I guess that when it comes to things like walking or speaking, there's a much higher necessity for it. Therefore, you know, probably nobody gives up on that. But yeah, I think the same ideas can be applied to tattooing or painting or drawing or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really love looking at this stuff kind of like it's a life teaching. You know, like there's so much that you can learn about life through engaging with a creative practice. And even just that by itself is valuable. Even if somebody doesn't have any ambition to become a career artist, you learn so much just by engaging in that creative process. You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn these kinds of bits of wisdom, you know, that you can then apply to other areas of your life too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like for myself, the way I think of it, it's always a win-win in the like life experience. It's all for me. It's all content. Like it's all content for as an artist to work from. You know, like I said, I started writing again, and I've been doing this kind of automatic writing where from the subconscious, where you don't stop the pen and whatever comes out comes out. And if anything's interesting from those sessions, then I bring more of my conscious mind into it and I develop it. And so today, this sounds crazy or silly, but I did all this writing that was pouring out. It was about taking a shit, like all these different experiences that I had with that. I know it's weird, right? But it's just like even something like that, you know what I mean? It's like it's coming from it's life experience that wasn't wasted. You know what I'm saying? And so to like when like for me moving to Florida, throwing myself into the tattoo thing, like I knew I wasn't going to quit. I'm not going to quit, but there was definitely days from failure, like, man, it was really hard and it crossed my mind. It was like a natural emotion or something. But that's what was always in the back of my mind, that regardless, like it's content I could take even from those painful experiences and make art out of it. You know what I mean? And for me, that drives me. I love that. It's like it makes me hungry for newer experiences all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's due to a very particular perspective that you've cultivated. It's kind of, I guess you could say it's a mindset, but the idea that that there's value in everything we experience, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And I try to hold that
Absolutely.
perspective also as much as possible. But that's a very, very valuable way to look at life. Because in that way, there's no such thing as this is a good thing that's happening or this is a bad thing that's happening. Everything in that way is then a gift, because even if something unpleasant happens, you're still learning from it and you're still able to, reap value from that experience.
Yeah, I think it's also not all writers, but I think it's definitely more of a writer's type of mindset. Like I remember I was into Proust at one point, and I remember reading about him, and that was like something he would chase, more negative experiences, like getting his heart broken or something, because then it gave something to write about. You know what I mean? And I definitely find myself, I put that in check, but guilty of a similar thing, just kind of like diving into maybe experiences I wouldn't have otherwise, because there's something on the other end of that to be learned, and I love that. I mean, that's wisdom. And for me to get that, you kind of have to go through the wire.
Mm. That's why I advise my friends not to date poets. Because I think
Yeah.
poets, I'm like, they're just going to use you for the heartbreak. You can't even help it. They're going to make you break their heart and then they're going to write poetry about it. And
Yeah, yeah.
in the case of my friends who are like serious poets, like that seems to be like at least kind of true.
Yeah. That's hilarious. I bet there is some
Always
truth in that.
manifesting heartbreak, like
Yeah.
trauma, so they have something to write about.
Yeah.
But totally, man, that's something that has been coming through a lot because I have been diving in more deeply into like Pema Chodron's teachings and Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings about diving into discomfort, like turning
Yeah.
toward discomfort, and that's the place where you're more likely to find enlightenment because then you're really in contact with truth. That the truth of reality is that it's unstable And the first noble truth there is suffering. There's unpleasantness within that instability and that uncertainty, and how vulnerable we are in that. And when you can really just be at home in that, then you're grounded in something real. But the way that people operate all the time in life is trying to do something that gives them a sense of security, which is fundamentally false. So, people are chasing after wealth, status, whatever it is, because they feel like if they get this thing, the American dream is like you get the house, you get the wife, you have the car, you have the job. But once you get that, then it's all good. Like you're taken care of. But it just doesn't work that way, And so that's like a hopeless pursuit.
Yeah. Well, relating it to the current situation, right? It's interesting, like in that a similar way where, like crisis, it reveals us to ourselves, And so like in a situation where we have to spend so much time with ourselves, and, others that we live with or whatever, a lot of what you're describing is just, a lot of that luxury is taken from us, you know what I mean? And we're left with ourselves. And I think that's a really interesting place to be in. I mean, I think it's one thing, it's maybe, like easier perhaps for, more introverted types like you and myself and artists, whatever. But, like I try to empathize with just like the general public, like anyone that doesn't have, something that we have, something autonomous to ourselves, you know what I mean? Like the creative process with just, we could spend all day with ourselves, you know what I mean? And forget about the world. But it's just like, it's interesting, like when you build a life, because I've been there, I've built a life where I valued external things more than I should have. And then I lost those external things, and then I had no idea of who I am, you know what I mean? But that's when the work began. That's when I discovered someone like Chogyam Trungpa. And I read those books, like his ideas of fearlessness. I forget what it's called, Dive into Fear or something. But I like how he described fearlessness. He says it's not living without fear, but it's going beyond fear, you know what I mean? And it's working with fear. Fear is a really interesting subject in itself. Like it really has a major influence on anyone's life, like anyone's future, anyone's path. Are you working with it, or are you living your life in a way of denying it? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's really fascinating because it comes up every single day in some form. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think fear is one of those things that people have a naturally magnetic repulsion to. So it makes it really hard to observe it, because most people don't let it stick around long enough to really look at it. And that's something that Chogyam Trungpa talks about a lot, is familiarizing yourself with fear, so that when it arises, instead of immediately doing whatever you can to get out of that fearful state, instead looking at it with a sort of curiosity and fascination. What is this experience, and why is it happening? What does it feel like? And when you can get more familiar with it, you can become more comfortable within that. And by becoming more comfortable within a state of fear or anxiety, then it enables you to take much bolder actions, because you're not limited by that anymore. And that's something that I remember you used to like go swimming in the San Francisco Bay every morning at like 5 a.m. in the freezing cold water.
Yeah.
Do you still do that?
Well, I'm in Florida now, so I can't. But that was one of the best practices of my life, and that was all about encountering and confronting like fear, discomfort. Like the colder it was, the more it was a thing where my mind would react. It'd create stories. Oh, let's just stay in bed today. You do this every day. Give yourself a break. And I was challenging that part of myself. And like anytime my mind said that, I would just go beyond it, and I would head right to the beach, and I'd go in that water. You know what I mean? And it's I just love like, doing stuff like that, like just being aware that, like there's this part, to myself that's just so resistant, you know what I mean? But you can go beyond that and you can become the boss of that, you know what I mean? Because most of my life I lived it the other way around, where that voice or whatever determined who I was and the direction of my life, which was basically just, creating a really small circle and staying within that circle. You know what I mean? But there's so much more outside of that circle. Like, why would I ever do that? And I only really discovered that by doing stuff like swimming in the bay, you know?
Yeah, you were kind of doing the Wim Hof method before that was really
I
popular.
know.
You know?
Well, I knew about him at the time,
Okay.
but he became, like big later. But, I got that from like a former mentor of mine, and he introduced me to the water. And man, it was just, it came at a point in my life. It's just a typical story, like, like things falling apart. But, man, it was just an extraordinary experience, like I do miss that space because it was very, I called it my temple because it was really like a place to experience something beyond myself consistently, you know what I mean?
You were doing
But it was
cold
always,
before it was cool.
what is it?
I said you were doing cold before it was cool.
Yeah. I was trying to get anyone and everyone to join me, and like almost nobody would do it. Like, like everyone just said it's crazy. But the irony is, I used to be one of those people. I would judge like people swimming in the water and point my finger at them. And then ironically, years later, I became that person that I had been pointing at earlier because I understood now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, wow, wild. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been doing some. I mean, here there's not a lot of access to cold water, also, but I've done some ice baths, and where you just soak in a bunch of ice, and
Yeah. I
yeah,
thought to do that.
it's really stimulating,
Yeah.
and it's a cool experience to watch your mind get all queasy and like the whining mind. I don't want to do this, and then you push through that place,
Yeah.
and like having that kind of like gentle authority over your own reactivity to circumstances. There's something really empowering and liberating about that. And I think that that's kind of where Chogyam Trungpa was going with his teachings about fearlessness is we are so limited, people in general are so limited because they don't want to do what makes them feel uncomfortable, or they don't want to do what makes them feel afraid. Um, and our lives could be so much more, and we could have so much more openness of experience and access to experience if we were more willing to do things that put us into a state of fear or discomfort. So
Yeah.
when you can kind of break that program that says that makes me afraid, so therefore I'm not going to do it, and instead it's like that makes me feel afraid, that's my signpost to go towards that thing, then it just opens up so much more, you know. And I think something that's been like a repeating idea throughout these conversations that I've had for this podcast is curiosity is one of the most useful tools against fear, because curiosity is a very open and humble state to be in, where you're not making assumptions about what something is going to be. It acknowledges that you don't know, so you're going into an experience not already like tense and locked down and rigid, just flexible and open to be like, well, what would happen if, I think the more you can live your life from that place, the more you're just the more expansion you're going to have as a person.
Yeah, it all comes down to like mindset, I feel. You know what I mean? Like just going into any situation in a certain state of mind. I don't know if you, like recently, maybe half a year ago, I discovered David Goggins. Do you know of him?
Oh yeah, for sure. I went on a lot of David
Yes.
Goggins. I went down to David Goggins, a lot of access to cold water also. But I've done some ice baths, and where you just soak in a bunch of ice, and
Yeah, I
yeah,
thought to do that.
it's really stimulating, you know,
Yeah.
and it's a cool experience to watch your mind get all queasy and like the whining mind. I don't want to do this, and then you push through that place,
Yeah.
and like having that kind of like gentle authority over your own reactivity to circumstances. There's something really empowering and liberating about that, and I think that that's kind of where Chogyam Trungpa was going with his teachings about fearlessness. Is we are so limited, people in general are so limited because they don't want to do what makes them feel uncomfortable, or they don't want to do what makes them feel afraid. Um, and our lives could be so much more, and we could have so much more openness of experience and access to experience if we were more willing to do things that put us into a state of fear or discomfort. So
Yeah.
when you can kind of break that program that says that makes me afraid, so therefore I'm not going to do it, and instead it's like that makes me feel afraid, that's my signpost to go towards that thing, then it just opens up so much more, you know. And I think something that's been like a repeating idea throughout these conversations that I've had for this podcast is curiosity is one of the most useful tools against fear, because curiosity is a very open and humble state to be in, where you're not making assumptions about what something is going to be. It acknowledges that you don't know. So you're going into an experience not already like tense and locked down and rigid, just flexible and open to be like, well, what would happen if, I think the more you can live your life from that place, the more you're just the more expansion you're going to have as a person.
Yeah. It all comes down to like mindset, I feel. You know what I mean? Like just going into any situation in a certain state of mind. I don't know if you, like recently, maybe half a year ago, I discovered David Goggins. Do you know of him?
Oh yeah, for sure. I went on a little David
Yes.
Goggins. I went down a David Goggins rabbit hole last
Yeah.
yeah.
So he's extreme, obviously, but it's like a lot of those ideas of just like he has his own. I mean, I think of the dude as like a shaman. You know what I mean? Like he really went to like that place and like the underworld, and he came back to share it with us. You know what I mean? But he's very he definitely has an aggressive approach, but
For sure.
like I just love that like ideas that like how like any of us are capable of so much more. Like we all have like potential within us, and the thing is, how do you tap into that? Because most often the case it's like fear or laziness or both. You know what I mean? And going beyond those things, working with those things. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, it's like. I mean, it's something it always comes up, man, like fear, 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 fear. And it's just,
Absolutely.
it's really fascinating.
I'd love to talk more with you about this. We have like a minute, 30 seconds left because it's limited only to an hour. What if
Yeah,
we, if you have more time to talk, what if we ended this live and just jumped into another one, and we could keep this conversation rolling for a little bit longer?
sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just end this and then open up a new one, and I'll see you in just a second.
Okay. Sounds good.
Welcome back.
Hey, um, just so you know, this might not work because my phone's at 2%, and it's like, I guess it's draining it, even though it's plugged in.
Oh,
But we can try, so it just might die.
okay. Yeah. And just hi to everybody who's joining us now. Um, yeah, man, David Goggins. I listened to David Goggins' audiobook, and then I listened to like all of his interviews on the internet, and I mean, he got me like waking up at like 5 in the morning and going for like 10-mile jogs.
Yeah, I
It was
think
like
that's,
really motivating.
yeah.
I was like, if
I
he can
went,
do it, anybody, I can do it. You know, like,
yeah,
and exercise is honestly one of the things I have the strongest resistance to. It's like I hated PE when I was a kid. It was my hell. Yeah, probably if I was ever sent to hell, it would be like being trapped in high school PE class forever. But yeah,
yeah,
David Goggins like really like made me challenge those assumptions about myself, because he was like 290 pounds. I was once 250 pounds. I've also like
oh,
gone
wow.
through a big transformation in my body, but my story is a little bit less dramatic than David Goggins, because once I kind of got to a aesthetically appropriate like weight, I didn't really push into like the Roman god status that he's that he's become. And I don't think it is like necessarily my highest ambition in life to become like a super athlete like he did, but it is definitely like inspiring that you can go from that place of being a 290-pound donut addicted slump into like a Greek god warrior.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you still got time.
I do have time. I guess it's about an orientation of priorities. Like he
Yeah,
obviously made it his whole life's mission to become this physical, kinetic warrior, which isn't really what I value the most. I think I'd rather spend my whole life painting or something, or like making art, than focusing that much time and attention and energy onto my physical
on
state.
exercise. Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, and totally. He definitely he drives those concepts home about the importance of being able to be at home in immense discomfort.
Fuck.
Is your thing gonna die?
Yep. So we did it, guys. That was another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast. I am the host. My name is Jake Cobrin. I want to thank you again for tuning in and listening to this episode, and I hope that this was a valuable experience for you. If you're interested, you can watch these podcasts live on Instagram. I am doing between 3 and 4 live podcasts per week. And if you want to find that, my Instagram account is _.cobrin._ just for aesthetic embellishment. And please subscribe to this podcast so that you can be notified of further episodes. And that's about it. Many blessings to you wherever you might be. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Be well.